I'm Darren Morton.
I'm Simon Matthews. This is Lift.
The Lifestyle Medicine podcast where we dive into the science of health and well-being.
Well, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. Always nice to see you. Always nice to see
Always
you.
nice.
Which is in fact interesting because we get to see each other when we're recording this. Some of our listeners are indeed listeners. They listen to a podcast. This does go out on a YouTube channel as well. So we may well have some watchers as well as listeners. And so my first question to you is actually going to yeah, you go on.
Yeah, I should have shaved. Now that I remember that it does get posted, the visuals, I should have shaved today, but I didn't. But
okay. All right. Well, you've got that rugged academic look today, which is probably very appealing to a segment of our viewers.
Very small segment.
So I'm gonna show you something. So the people who are listening only will just have to wait for the reveal after this. But I'm going to show you something and ask you what you see. Right there. What do you see?
4 fingers.
Oh, what about now?
And lovely fingernails, manicured fingernails.
Interesting. What about on this hand?
Same.
Same.
Oh, a longer fingernail.
Oh, that's true. There is a longer one. Okay. Interesting that you made that observation. Lovely manicured fingernails. And I've got to say, I'll make a confession here. I don't actually trim and care for my own nails. I'm lucky. I'm lucky to be married to someone whom I can sit next to, and who will very kindly do that job for me periodically. But here's the thing: from the age of 9, or thereabouts, it's a long time ago now, so it's a little hard to recall exactly. But from the age of 9, I had something called onchotilomania. Do you know what that is?
No, but I had suspected it in you.
Well, onchotilomania is the tendency to pick your nails. So I was never a nail biter. And there is a different word for nail biting, and I forget what it is now. It starts with onchio, which is the prefix for nail. But for some reason that I genuinely don't understand, when I was about 9 years old, I started picking my nails, and I started picking them quite severely. The white part, whatever you call that, would be gone. They would often end up with ragged edges. Sometimes my fingers would hurt from doing it. And over the years, I made various efforts from time to time to stop this. I would think about it really, really hard. I'd make a decision that I was going to stop. I'd stop, and I'd sort of struggle with these internal, irresistible urges to start messing around with the end of my fingernails. And sometimes I'd resist that for, a couple of days, 3 days. I think the longest I ever got was maybe close to a couple weeks. And then something might happen, I might sort of lose that battle against that urge. And then once I had sort of picked at one nail, it felt like they all needed to be even. Yeah, so I would just keep going. Or sometimes I'd inadvertently damage a nail, and then rather than clipping it, I would pick it to try and make it more even. And having done that, I'd be back in that cycle again. So I tried and tried so many times to stop, and just just couldn't. And it wasn't something that I felt a conscious urge about as such. I would kind of just find myself doing this. So you probably got a bit of a sense already of where this might be going. And I'm obviously someone who's very, very interested in behavioural change and how we modify behaviours and how we start and stop how we start new behaviours and cease old behaviours, replace them, and so on. So here's what happened. 4 years ago, or nearly 4 years ago, in the middle of 2022, and I can't tell you exactly the date because I didn't notice it at the time. But in the middle of 2022, we came out we sort of in Australia, we started to emerge from the pandemic restrictions. Travel restrictions were eased, lifted. We were able to travel both nationally and internationally again. And in the middle of that year, I went on vacation in the June for about 4 weeks. Somewhere in there, and as I said, I don't know exactly when, but in my mind, I mark July 1 as the date because it was around about then. Around about July 1, one day, I looked at my fingernails and had this sudden realisation that I hadn't touched them. I hadn't picked them. And even after noticing, I had no particular urge to do that. And that just continued. And it continued, and it continued, and it continued. And on 1 July this year, I'm now 59. So this stopped somewhere around the middle of my 55th year. So I'd been doing this continuously for 46 years. 4 years ago, I stopped and have simply never started again. I don't have an urge. If I get a rough nail or I break a nail, I feel no urge to tidy it up through picking. If one of them does get broken and I trim it, I have no. It just I just leave it alone. It's now kind of unremarkable to me completely.
Well, do you know what? I am fascinated. I'm fascinated to know how you broke that habit, because I have habits of my own that need to be broken. But as you're explaining this story, my mind does go back to a habit I picked up at a similar age to that that you described, that I have not broken as yet, and that was, and I have vivid memories of this at school. I cracked my knuckles, and I would constantly be cracking my knuckles. And my friend, I won't mention his name, like that. My best friend, he had a filthy mouth on him, so he would swear incessantly. So what we did, we decided we need to break our bad habits. So we had a jar, and this is as a young person, every time I cracked my knuckles, or every time he dropped a bomb that he shouldn't have, we had to put 5 cents in the jar, which was a lot of money to a poor student back then. And then at the end of the the end of the term, we would go, and if we had enough money, which we always did, we would buy gravy and chips, which was not very lifestyle. I wasn't a lifestyle medicine sort of person back then. And so, you know what? We never broke the habit. I still crack my knuckles to this day. A couple of years ago, I was driving through the town where that old high school friend lives, and so I called him up to say, "Hey, I'm wondering if he was around, I could come and visit." And I got his answering service, but his answering service had 4 expletive swear words in it. So clearly, he hasn't broken his habit either. So tell us, brother, how can we mend our ways?
Very interesting. Can I just say before we go any further? I mean, chips and gravy. Chips and potatoes. That's a plant-based meal, is it not?
There you go. I feel better about it already.
So when you said your best friend was someone who swears incessantly, my first thought was, he's talking about me, but evidently not.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. The short answer to what's gone on here is I have no idea. I just have no idea. This is,
Simon,
for me, this is one of the most significant behavioural change mysteries in my life.
I'm going to say you're the expert. You are the one person that we come to have these things explained. And yeah. I'm waiting for the words of wisdom.
Yeah. Well, I've got some reflections on different things, but none of them, either individually or even collectively, I think, actually point really clearly to the idea of an explanation that would show why I stopped that behaviour. And as you know, one of the things that I'm very focused on in the area of behavioural change is connecting ideas around meaning and purpose and personal value to behaviour change, because those things generally form a really great foundation for different choices that we might make and so on. When we can anchor particular behaviours in meaning in our lives, then it really does create a great foundation for lasting behaviour. These sorts of things generally are called BFRBs, body-focused repetitive behaviours, and in fact, you now find things like this in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So things like trichotillomania, which is hair pulling, nail biting, and so on. And they're generally considered to be disorders that have a connection with anxiety at some level. I don't have a recollection of experiencing that. I don't have a recollection of connecting it up to something anxious in my life. But here's a really interesting thing, and this might shed some light on your knuckle cracking challenge. There's a theory called Wegener's ironic process theory, and this theory was articulated about maybe 40 years ago in the sort of mid-late 1980s, and it's sometimes, I think sometimes it's called the white bear theory. I call it the pink elephant theory, and it goes like this. Just imagine for a moment that you can see in front of your field of vision a massive herd, thousands and thousands and thousands of brightly pink-coloured elephants, like sort of hot pink, that fluorescent kind of disco hot pink. There's thousands of them. They're walking right to left in your field of vision. So can you do that right now? Can you imagine all those elephants just going right to left? There they go, just swaying. They're all hot pink and so on. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to do something else. Now I want you to stop thinking about pink elephants. Don't think about pink elephants anymore. Get pink elephants out of your mind. Whatever you do, it doesn't matter what you do, stop pink elephants. No more pink elephants should be in your field of vision. Stop the pink elephants altogether. And I want you to tell me now whether you found that a little bit difficult to stop thinking about pink elephants.
You still have pink elephant sitting on top of your head right now as I'm staring at your screen. No.
So this is Wegener's ironic process theory, which basically says that the moment you start monitoring something like that, even to try and stop it, you're actually keeping it cognitively active. And it becomes very, very difficult, therefore, to move that, in this case, move the image out of your mind. On the other hand, if I ask you, do you remember that, this is also not lifestyle medicine, not a lifestyle medicine drink, but do you remember that drink that we all had as kids, the GI lime cordial? It was kind of that deep green colour. Okay, so now get that green colour in your mind. I want you to imagine that you can see giraffes coloured that deep green, that GI lime green. They're not spotted, they're just a solid colour. And again, they're moving right to left across your field of vision, just gently kind of swaying backwards and forwards like that. Thousands and thousands of GI lime coloured giraffes moving right to left. Now, I'm pretty confident in saying that during the whole time you've been thinking about GI lime coloured giraffes, you haven't had a single pink elephant in your mind. So
that's true.
As soon as you stop kind of focusing on that thing, it becomes much less cognitively active, and it tends to drift away.
From a pedagogical perspective, like even when we're teaching things, we know, like skill acquisition, for example, you don't say, and I've just said don't, but you don't say, watch out for that bump when you're learning to ride a bike, or don't hit that.
Yeah.
That speed bump, or alerting people using a don't or watch out, and then naming the item. All it does is we move towards what we see. And same, they even say in parenting,
exactly right.
Instructing kids not to, don't say, don't touch that. What are the kids here? Touch that. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
This is interesting. Intriguing.
Absolutely. And we do the same thing in behavioural change, of course, in health behaviour change.
LIFT is supported by the LIFT Project, an educational adventure where you learn science-based ways to lift your mood and your life. The LIFT Project is lifting lives around the globe, in healthcare settings, workplaces, schools, universities and communities. To find out more, visit theliftproject.global.
And interestingly, people often begin the journey of health behaviour change by wanting to stop or quit something, whether it's smoking or drinking, soft drinks, cans of soda, or eating, fried food like chips and gravy. And so people, or even people will even frame activity that way and say, oh, I've just got to stop being so inactive. I've just got to stop being, so lazy or something like that. And if we stick with that frame of stopping something, it almost never leads somewhere useful, because not having a cigarette when you're feeling stressed is a very difficult thing to do. Not picking up a chocolate-coated donut when you're feeling very stressed is a difficult thing to do. On the other hand, choosing to do something different becomes a little easier. So one possibility here is that with something that's kind of deeply embedded, like one of these body-focused repetitive behaviours, in my case, onchyotilomania, the whole idea of trying consciously to control the process, in fact, just makes it a whole lot more alive, and eventually just leads you straight back to it. It's what you see, it's what you hear, and ultimately it becomes what you do. There is another very interesting hypothesis, which we've talked about before on the show, and it's a relatively young hypothesis. It's by Verplanken and Wood, I think, and it's called the habit discontinuity hypothesis. And the premise behind this is that habits, of course, aren't just habits. They're habits supported by context, and therefore, the setting, the sensory cues that you have, the triggers that you're susceptible to, even just the daily rhythms of your life, are all part of that whole package of behaviour. So in the habit discontinuity hypothesis experiment, they took a group of people who had just moved house, which is a pretty major disruption to our habits. And many of us, after we move house, find ourselves going to that same corner cupboard in the kitchen to get out a container, and then you realise you now put them in a different place in the kitchen. So there does tend to be if you like, a lag or a hangover when we change the context, and it also seems then to act to kind of disrupt what we might be doing. So in the habit discontinuity hypothesis, what they did was help people to establish a new behaviour in their lives after moving house. So the whole thinking behind this is if you disrupt the context, you interrupt all those automatic kind of cue routines and cue chains before the habit kind of picks up again. So in my case, I went on vacation to a completely different location. There'd been this kind of, whatever it was, 3 years, 2.5 years of really quite, I don't know, what would you, sort of quite, not automatized, but a very sort of limited and restricted style of living because of the pandemic. We tended to remain at home. We tended to limit our outside excursions. A lot of things that we used to do, we didn't do anymore, and so on. Then I went on vacation to a place that I hadn't been, to a new context. Filled with kind of buzzing life, just in the way that we all remembered. I wasn't thinking about this. I wasn't trying to monitor it or trying to stop it in any way. But the context changed really significantly, and I wonder whether that laid the foundation. The interesting part of that, of course, is how quickly it actually happened, and it was within a period of just a couple of weeks that I observed that this behaviour had simply vanished from my life. So that's a possibility that we could invoke the habit discontinuity hypothesis. Even that though I think has limitations, because the habit discontinuity hypothesis is good at explaining an initial change, but it's not good at explaining a sustained change. So I'm still a little bit puzzled there. I think perhaps we could appeal to habit discontinuity in some ways. There was 45 years of varying attempts to try and control or change this, and maybe, even though those 45 years of attempts didn't feel successful, I don't know, maybe there was this kind of slow, chipping away at the foundation, and that vacation was just the final kind of right condition for new behaviour to be present. But the other puzzling part of it is please.
I've got a thought as you've been describing this, which you might not like this thought, but I'll say it anyway. But it's interesting because there is good research showing, for example, that smoking cessation amongst older people, and this is the part that you might not like, can actually happen, but it can happen relatively easier, because often a lot of those behaviours are actually dopamine hits. And I'm thinking, for example, me cracking my knuckles, right? And I still crack my knuckles. But you know what? It actually, it sort of feels good, right? It actually gives me a bit of there's something about that. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but there's some sort of dopamine rush attached to that. And what we do know is that as you age, mature, you actually have a decrease in dopaminergic receptors. So, could it be, and this is why, for example, in some contexts, some people will quite easily shake off addictive behaviours that they've had for a lifetime later in life, because it just physiologically they don't need it anymore. And if they have a disrupting type episode, that's enough to go, I don't really get a high from that. I don't really get that rush that I once had. And so could that be another explanation for this change?
Well, that's a really interesting explanation. So if my understanding of the neurobiology of this is correct, the reduction in dopaminergic receptors is not accompanied by a reduction in dopamine. We still produce the same amount of dopamine, but because the receptors are fewer, they fill up more easily.
So you're not getting the same.
So So here's one of the other interesting observations, that in roughly that same time frame, I would say that I generally feel more content and satisfied about most areas of my life than I recall feeling, 15, 20 years ago. In other words, I have generally an abiding sense of pleasure about many, many things that I do in my life, including some quite incidental things that, probably are meaningless to most people. But I feel like I get easily satisfied by those. So, interesting. Maybe there's, maybe I'm reaching a level of maturity in which maturity, yeah, I'm more mature than I once was. So that's an intriguing possible explanation.
But what I do like, and I'm thinking, there's actually that famous little parable, and it talks about getting demons.
This is not
out,
the parable of the man who picked his nails, is it?
No, it's not the parable. It's actually, I think it's actually a biblical parable, but it's this whole idea, and because what you're saying resonates a lot with me in this regard. It talks about how, if you kick a demon out, whatever your demons may be, unless you replace it with something else, that's good, then other things come in and make the situation worse. And I think there's definitely a truth to that. I find that, when you're trying to break something that's, that's not wanted, if you're not intentional about replacing it with something that you do want, that's good, and I like the idea of shifting your focus away from those pink elephants to the green giraffes or whatever it might be. If the green giraffes are good, if they're not, they might be the things that march in and just replace where the elephants were, and they might even be worse hosts or worse residents. So, yeah, I find this is a really interesting thing. I think that often we're so focused when it comes to breaking behaviour. I know this is my default of just don't do that, as compared to maybe do this. And that, I think, might be a whole lot more empowering and enable success.
But even with the do this, a lot of our behavioural change thinking is focused on making a change to your underlying identity. So this is a type of third order change, if you like, in order that the superficial or the surface level behaviour then follows. So theories like self-determination theory, even motivational interviewing, really focus on this idea of internalising a different identity, so that changed behaviour, which is on the way, not yet here, that changed behaviour now fits neatly with that new and different identity. So in other words, it's got a home that it can go to. You don't try and change the behaviour first and then have it looking for somewhere to belong. You get the new home and then the behaviour fits. But that the opposite kind of happened for this. The behavioural change happened first, and then that shift in identity followed. I am now someone who cares for my fingernails. That's the kind of internalized identity I have of myself. But that followed long after the shift in behaviour. So that kind of inverted that. Interestingly, William Miller of motivational interviewing fame has a line of inquiry called quantum change research. And fewer people know about this than know about his work on motivational interviewing, although you can look it up very easily. And really he's focused on these kind of sudden, discontinuous and even permanent shifts. So things like this, things like people who one day just put down a packet of cigarettes and never go back to it again. They don't have any internal struggle about it. They don't have regret. They don't have urges to go back. They just change. So it's the sort of shift a little like what you were just talking about before in relation to dopamine. Not explained by stages of change, not explained by identity formation, not explained by anchoring behaviour in values. Often just triggered by completely mundane and everyday contexts. And interestingly, Miller's research suggests that those changes can actually be more durable than gradual, incremental, foundationally motivated changes. So here's another kind of curious dimension to the whole puzzle of behavioural change. The place that I'm kind of left with here is really, I would have to say, a place of not knowing. I've spent my career. I've spent now. Oh, how much time? Approaching 40 years now. I've been working generally in the area of behavioural change, and I've been intrigued by behavioural change for that time, and I absolutely believe in the work. I absolutely believe in a structured and methodological process to doing this. I've seen the effects in the work that I do directly. I've seen the effects in the work of other people. And despite all of this, my own most complete, most satisfying behavioural change happened outside any of those frameworks, which is a real puzzle to me.
And this speaks volumes, though, doesn't it, to human behaviour? Like, if even yourself, as a behaviour change expert, can't figure out yourself, let alone other people as well, it really does say something. And I'm thinking maybe there's that quote that you're unique, just like everyone else, but maybe you are especially special. But look, if you, and I'm talking to the listeners now, if you have some, behaviour change, perhaps a bad habit or a good habit or whatever it might be that you kicked and changed, and it's a big
tell us about it. Yeah,
we would love to hear about it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about other experiences like this of behavioural changes that people have made, where they just have no clear explanation for it. Yeah, absolutely. And while we're talking about such things too, if you have a question related to lifestyle medicine or behavioural change that you're curious about and you'd love us to discuss on the podcast, just reach out. Darren and I always forget our email address, but it's in the show notes, so you can click on that address and send us your question. We'd love to hear from you.
Lift is presented by Simon Matthews and Darren Morton. It's sponsored by the Lift Project and supported by Avondale University. Music provided by Pixabay. If you have a question or a topic you would like to hear more about, send us an email to podcast@theliftproject.global. The Lift Project. Lift your mood, lift your life.